Please be seated. As Rabbi Paul Cohn from Temple Jeremiah begins the sacred funeral ceremony.
Beloved friends, we gather this morning to pay a lasting tribute of love to the life and to the love of Joanne Abelman, who has passed on into eternity. We acknowledge that indeed death has taken our beloved Joanne. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Joanne's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues now through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance, for all these and more we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It teaches us of our kinship with the divine, in joy as in sorrow, in light as in dark, in life as in death. Psalm 23, the Shepherd's Psalm. Adonai roi lo echsar, bihinot eshe yarbitzeni, al me menuchot, Al me menuchot yenahaleni, nafshi yeshovev yeshovev, yancheni v'magle tzedek, yancheni v'magle tzedek, leman shemo, gam ki elech Begets al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni taharoch lefanai shulchan egetzorerai Di shanta vashem roshi kosi revaya Achto vachesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai veshavti bevet Adonai leorech Yamim Adonai roi lo echsar Adonai roi lo echsar. In the pamphlet that you received here at the chapel, in the inside cover, you'll find the English translation of the 23rd Psalm, and I invite you, if you wish, to join together with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our tradition teaches us that birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach. God has given and God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. In ancient people we are well acquainted with grief and the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave and that there is strength in faith. With Job we say Adonai natan, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one, Joanne Abelman, who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and your love, as we now say, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. Amen. I invite you to take these next few moments to call forward the cherished memories that you have of Joanne's life and how her love touched your hearts in this moment of silent reflection. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Be acceptable in your sight. God, our rock and our Redeemer. God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. There is a midrash, a story that the rabbis tell of two friends who used to take long walks together. And on one of their walks, they found themselves at a harbor. And they stopped and watched what was happening down below, the ships coming in and setting sail. And there was one ship at the dock and getting ready to set sail, a cruise ship, and There was a lot of celebration. People were singing, the picture with the confetti being thrown and the music playing. And at the same time, there was another ship that was coming into port. And it was coming in, no fanfare, no music, nobody waving from the dock at this ship. And one friend turns to the other and says, "This is exactly the opposite of what should be happening. The ship that's about to set sail, we don't know what storms it might encounter or whether or not it may even make it safely back to port again. But the ship that has safely returned to port, that's cause for celebration." And the Midrash continues, this is the way it is in our lives as well. When a baby is born, there is much celebration, as of course there should be. But at the end of a person's life, there is an opportunity also to celebrate the love, to celebrate the joyful times, the times of celebration, and to bring those forward. And so we continue our service honoring Joanne with the words of family and friends. We'll first hear from in-laws, Jay and Jenny.
So many stories bubbling up and I get emotional for the first time. Wow. A lot of funny stories that I could tell about Joanne. We had a complicated, interesting relationship. I'll tell one story, and then if I get through it, one remembrance. The story is that I saw Joanne. I remember it as literally seeing her become a Jewish grandmother before my very eyes. Joanne had been kind of an indifferent person regarding becoming a grandparent. I think the idea of being called grandma when she was relatively young was not the most appealing idea to her. The grandchildren were an abstraction until they weren't. So until they were real, until Clara was born in October of 2002 and Eli came home in November of 2002, I think it was an idea that she hadn't really warmed up to. And she came to see Eli for the first time a day or two after we brought him home, and had been out, as you all probably know, Joanne had a very active social life, so she had been somewhere else with someone else doing something else before she came to see Eli. And this was just one more thing on her social calendar. And the transformation really happened in our living room. And it wasn't the transformation that often happens with grandparents that, they melt. They instantly fall in love, although I'm sure that was going on too. The thing that happened is that she became this hyper-vigilant nudge about all of the dangers, all of the things in our house that were suddenly a mortal threat to our new child. And she began to list them and followed each of them with the, "you've got to," and then it was a fill in the blank. Never mind that we had a baby proofer coming the next week. Never mind that Eli was still a babe in arms who couldn't do anything. She was detailing all of the things in our house that could kill him. He's here. He didn't get killed, so the story has a happy ending in that regard. But it really was like this transformation had happened, and I remember I wasn't nearly as good humored about it at the time. I was sort of annoyed. And I remember commenting after she left, like, who the hell was that person? Because the moment before she walked in the door, none of that grandmotherly instinct was in evidence, and then it just appeared. So I saw that happen. So that's one of my fondest memories of Joanne. And again, lots of other funny stories that I'm editing out. Maybe we'll get to share with some of you over coming days. Just one other memory, and I know we have a lot of speakers, which is not at all surprising knowing Joanne, so I'm not going to take up a lot more time, but quite simply, Joanne was at my wedding. My parents weren't. David's father wasn't. And this was 21 years ago when people literally were calling us saying, "Isn't this illegal?" And there were people who really thought we might be arrested for getting married. And Joanne wasn't there as a political statement, and Joanne was very forthright that she wasn't going to become an activist in a very sort of showy, what will the neighbors think kind of way, but she was quite simply there. And at the end of the day, looking back, I think that my whole embrace of Judaism is one of the things she loved most about me. And her whole embrace of David and I as a couple, David, Miriam, Eli, and I as a family are at the center of my love for her. So I will always be grateful for that.
Okay. Take the mask off, okay. I like your stories, Jay, they're very true. Anyways, I met Joanne one day after Michael took me to see the house he grew up in. She arrived home from shopping and buying a bunch of lingerie. She loved to shop. I met his dog, his 2 cats that day. We would spend all the holidays with Michael's family, and we were always invited, with Michael's family, and mine were always invited too. Okay. I remember the first holiday I went to, she must have had over 40 dishes of food. Food kept arriving at our table. Then dessert came too. I had never seen so much food made for Passover. She always had many people over to celebrate the holidays with. We went to Florida with her and my mom for a week. She went into Stuart Weissman's store with my mom and me, and she bought, wait a minute, where did I go? She went to Stuart Weissman's store with my mom and me, and she bought several pairs of shoes with us. She also bought the same pair of sandals as me and my mom. She liked to always buy the same as anybody else that was shopping with her. She told me she really liked my sandals. She bought the same pair of sandals. Let's see. She bought She bought the same dishes we got for our wedding, which I was amazed by because I was like, why does she want the same dishes? But she said she liked my dishes. This is too small, the way we wrote this. She told me she really, okay, wait. Oh, yeah. So my artwork was hanging in her living room. She had copied it off the internet, and she put like 8 pictures, one on top of each other, which was kind of interesting. She liked to look at my artwork in her living room on the floor. She always was going to the theater and movies and would tell me about the show she had just seen. I would ask Michael to help me with gardening, and he said his mom was the gardener, not him. Over the years, we would all go out to nice restaurants to celebrate all our birthdays and Mother's Day. Oh, I know. She liked celebrating. I never realized how much time she spent picking out her flowers from the many catalogs she got in the mail. She told me the flowers I planted for her, she really liked outside her house. Flowers made her happy. Her eyes would light up when she saw them. When we got engaged, she gave me a list of over 100 people she wanted to invite, and she insisted she wanted to invite everyone. We had to cut it down. We ended up having a much smaller wedding than she wanted. I asked what season she liked best. She said fall. Winter time, she liked cool weather.
We'd like to hear from grandson Jacob. Eli.
Hello. From what I understand, there's people online here. So, hello, people virtually who are watching us virtually. I might have known my grandma, but I was honestly a grandson. And being a grandson, being a grandson it's great in some ways, and being a grandchild in general, the one disadvantage is you're getting to know a person at the end of their life. Like, let's say their stories. Like, they might be mixed up, forgotten, not as good as, like, early in their life. It's very different. Like, you're not seeing them when they were, like, as active or knowing things as well. That's part of the disadvantage. And it's a very strange thing to be a grandchild. And I know that all of you, that was my own personal perspective of knowing my grandma. I know all of you had your own different perspectives and knew her in different ways. All of you, and you all had your own different ways of knowing her. but today I'd like to discuss the traits that I think we all could learn from her. Persistency. My grandma did almost the exact same routine for almost 10 years of her life. That's a long time. And she would wake up, eat breakfast, watch television. She would probably eat lunch with her friends, and she would maybe try and figure out how her computer worked at some point. She would then also either go to the doctor, go shopping, and then finally she would go at the end of the day also hanging out with her friends. As my dad said and my mother said, she was very social. And from what I understand, personally, she put lots of hours into two things mainly, teaching and cooking. If you ask my dad, he'll tell you all day about how she was a restaurant-level cook. Trust me, ask him. He'll tell you for a while. And she brought love and support into almost everything she did, where it was teaching, and she loved to tell me and Eli and Miriam and everyone about her teaching she did for years. And finally, she was very caring. My grandma, I'd just like to finish with one last thing. From my understanding, Eli had very similar words said to him. My cousin, before she died, she said something to him. She's told me these words: "I love you forever."
Now hear from grandson Eli.
Hello. So I'm just kind of making this up on the spot because I didn't really prepare. So my grandma was I'd say a very, very strong person. She would fall, and then she would tell my dad, and then she would always say, don't worry about it. Which brings me up to one point where this really showed her strength. I would always go over to her house, kind of like over the summer. She was really kind of declining, so I would always spend most of my days, actually all my days, going over there and helping her. So this one time I was getting her food, and she was upstairs, and I hear this just giant thud. I'm like, did something fall? What was that? And she had fallen and actually hit the back of her head on the side of her chest. So I make sure she doesn't have a concussion or anything, or something like that. I call my dad saying, "Oh, she fell, and her head's gonna hurt, but And my dad's so my dad calls her, and is like, you should go to the hospital. And grandma was like, no. I started yelling. He was like, no, I'll not go to the hospital. And so she just kept denying it. So that really showed, I thought, a lot of strength. And but she would always, she would take Miriam and I to school, when she retired. And the time when she would just drive us or anything, I thought that was very, it was very memorable times, and I really don't really know what else to say, but I definitely have a lot of memories, of her, and she was definitely a huge part of my life, and she she would always say, you're a drummer and everything, because, and that really has inspired me to keep drumming. And now that I go to college for drums, it's really good. So I will always have that support and everything. But I definitely just want to say that I really will love her and miss her for the rest of my life. So yeah.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Jacob. Friendship was so very, very important to Joanne. And I'd like to invite Edie to come forward. Someone who's known Joanne since they were 3 or 4, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi. You said two words in part of your speech about journey and destination. And I hope some of my words can bring some love and some happy thoughts. I have nothing funny to say, but life is funny in itself, so that's okay. Just the fact that I made it here on time, and I want to honor my over 7-decade friend. I met Joanne when I lived by Morse Beach in Rogers Park, and she lived a couple doors away from me. Her mother was another mother to me, and Joanne is and was a sister to me. In her journey to this destination, she loved to travel, and we were blessed in 2014 to travel together to Plano, Texas, to my oldest grandson's bar mitzvah. And my family treated her as family. I know she felt accepted. We had dinners, we shared a hotel room, we flew together, and at that time, I was able to help Joanne with her walker. Now I'm very proud to be a 2-hip recipient as of a month or two ago, and Joanne always encouraged me to take those adventures and make myself stronger and have a better quality of life. And even when we were distanced due to Muncie, Indiana, or Fayetteville, North Carolina, somehow we shared simchas and we shared sadness always together, whether it was on the phone or whether I was privileged to go on the train to her 8th grade graduation. And as Eli said, or was it Jacob, that grandmas kind of have secondary kind of thoughts. So if any of my years are wrong, I had to look on my iPhone to get the numbers. But Joanne taught me to cook. She taught me how to be a friend. And most of all, she was never judgmental. And as Michael said to me in his phone call the other day, she was a wonderful listener. So Joanne, your destination is now, I will never forget, millions and many, many happy, wonderful stories that I'll be glad to share more with the family. And thank you, Joanne, for being my best friend forever.
And now we'll hear from son David.
Before I pay tribute to my mom, I want to pay tribute to Gabriela Castrahan and her many friends from Hadassah and her temple who let her live her best life that she could in those last few months. Now to my mom. As we honor her life, I want to focus on her heroic resilience. First, let me say that heroic does not mean without exception. My mother was deeply human and, like all of us, had her inconsistencies. Once when Jay and I told my mom about someplace we were going at night and asked her what she was doing, she responded, "Oh, I'm just staying home. I think I have some old peanut butter I can eat." As many can attest, she could be an Olympic caliber powder. When it came to the big stuff, especially in retrospect, her upbeat attitude and steady competence seemed pretty remarkable. I want to talk about that through 3 vignettes about 3 years of her life. The first is 1971. My mother really reflected 1950s femininity. She loved an album as a child called Manners Can Be Fun. And while she had career ambitions, really expected to be wife and mother and cook her way each month through Gourmet magazine, which she did. My parents married when she had just turned 21, and by 1971 it was coming to an end. She had not finished college, did not know how to drive, had 2 young children, and no money. She found a neighbor who would watch Michael each day, enrolled in Northeastern, schlepped herself there on the bus, and then returned home in the evening to take care of the rest of life as well as homework. In October that year, her father died. Sensing that would happen, he filled the massive freezer that my mother still has at her house 50 years later with hot dogs and onion rolls before he checked into the hospital. That is what we largely lived on for the following year. She later graduated with high honors and ultimately picked up a master's degree. The second vignette I want to talk about is 1976. My grandmother was institutionalized and transferred from facility to facility to facility throughout northern Illinois, including Elgin. My brother was hit by a car that March and spent 6 months in a body cast. My stepfather's mother was hit by a train. My great-grandmother died. My stepfather lost a very good job and got into legal trouble. Our treasured Siamese cat died. My mother, now often the sole breadwinner, got to work by 7 a.m., then bounced from hospital to hospital, and then came home to pay bills and help my stepfather find and begin a new job. She took on tutoring to help ends meet. She never stopped, and she never complained. My mother could seemingly endure anything except being alone. I always said to people that she would have loved living on a kibbutz with everyone in everyone else's business. She liked difficult people. She loved work. When she retired, she dove into helping Eli and Miriam, and she told me that kept her alive. It was wonderful for Eli and Miriam, too, and for Jay and myself. She always found time to be with her incredible group of friends, as you've heard, who also are our family, too. From Edie to her TOPS group, a diet group from the 1960s, to her many fellow teachers, her temple, and Hadassah. So my last vignette, 1999. Many have noted that how close my mom and I were. So until a couple of weeks ago, I talked with her every day, often more than once. Well into the 1990s, I would work till about 10 o'clock at night, and at 11 o'clock, she and I would go out to dinner to Barnum and Bagel or Rossini's or a 24-hour diner. If I wanted to try La Francais, I went with Mom. If I wanted to go to Ravinia, I went with Mom. If there was something at the opera, guess, I went with Mom. That changed abruptly in 1999 when I met Jay, so that required a real adjustment on her part. And especially when my stepfather had, died the year before. And when I told her Jay and I were going to get married, she could have responded by stockpiling peanut butter and buckling down for the apocalypse. Instead, she said, "I was so worried about what would happen to you when I died. I didn't want you to be alone. And now I know I don't have to worry." And almost 23 years later, those are nice words to remember her by.
Michael?
I apologize for the length. I was having a little writer's block in noting this, but I'm going to try to capture my mom. First of all, my mom would be very pleased to see all of you here today. She loved entertaining, being with friends and family, and I'm sure she'd look out at the crowd and say, "What time are we eating today?" My mother was born in Charleston, West Virginia, not a very Jewish town, on October 10th, 1939, to my grandparents, Ben Krauss, traveling jewelry salesman, and my grandmother, Berna Krauss, i.e. Wolf, a homemaker. My mom's early years were spent with frequent moves as her dad's job took them to Muncie, Indiana, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Aurora, Illinois, as well as stops in Chicago as a 4-year-old, as has been said already. My mom met her best friend for life, Edie Kane, I think it was Rosenzweig's before, at their apartment on Morse Avenue. My mom's sister Diane soon arrived in 1945 and became a staple in her life. By the teen years, my mom was settled on the north side of Chicago, which would be her permanent home for the remainder of her life. The frequent moves made friends, family, and having a permanent home of utmost importance to my mother. My mother attended Amundsen High School, where she was one of the few Jews at Amundsen, and this is from stories she told me, and faced substantial anti-Semitism. Even in the face of it, she graduated a year early in 1956 as valedictorian, hoped to pursue a career as a psychologist, and it was identified as Smith College as being one of the schools of women's college, which would have strong interest in her. However, the twin factors of a school that didn't want to recognize a Jew as a school representative and didn't give her the honors and scholarships that came with it. And my grandfather, who was a man of his time and didn't think women needed college, led my mom to the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, and after a year she transferred to Navy Pier, where she met my father, Gary Goroff, in a carpool. Soon my mom's education and career pursuits were deferred, and they were married in 1960, with them starting a family shortly afterwards, pretty much so my dad could avoid the draft, with my brother arriving a year later and me arriving in 1967. My parents divorced in 1971, which David's touched on already. At the same time as the divorce, her father passed away. Our family was left penniless by the divorce with 2 young boys to support. So my mom went back to college to become a teacher at Northeastern Illinois University. Soon after, she met my stepfather, Alvin Abelman, who came to sell us carpeting and stayed for the remainder of his life until his death in 1998. It was important to my mom to own a house, and her friend Norma Goldberg took her all over Evanston and Skokie. But it was very important that she put us in District 68, which at the time she thought was a very safe district. And there was only one house, and it was in awful shape. It was dilapidated, small, and like the fixtures had been torn out, but she wanted that house, and she bought that house. My mother finished her degree in Northeastern in 1973 and started on a teaching career. First at East Prairie School in Skokie, then moving to Lawrence Hall School for Boys, and then embarking on a career as a Chicago public school education teacher at Lewis Worth in Hyde Park, with long drives daily, and we're talking about over an hour for those who don't know Chicago. From Skokie to the South Side, and then back to Northeastern as my mom worked on her master's, and she started on an education PhD, which she never finished. So enough for the biographical details. Who was my mom? I think she means a lot to a lot of different people, but I'll try to summarize how I view her. My mom was an incredible cook and could cook almost any style of cooking with expertise in French, Spanish, Asian, and obviously Jewish cooking. She made the sweet table for every event in the family and was often engaged by friends to help with their events. When Richie Melman started RJ Grunts, he even took 3 recipes from my mom, including an orange duck, which I just read a Tribune profile was one of the dishes that didn't really fit the restaurant and they cut after the early years. She would take pride in entertaining friends and family and always made so much food, as Jenny talked about. We'd be eating leftovers for days with the remainder frozen for future meals, and I'd be eating these for a year for lunches. My mother was my mentor and teacher for cooking and taught me how to time food in ovens for holidays when cooking big parties, and my go-to person for recipes. My mom loved to entertain. She would throw huge gatherings for friends. I think many of you probably were at these, with exotic drinks such as Harvey Wallbangers, Long Island iced teas, and super strong zombies. Trust me, I was encouraged to try them. And the appetizers that she would start days before the events. She also hosted Jewish holidays, always having the first and second night of Passover and Rosh Hashanah and breaking the fast for Yom Kippur. She would make massive amounts of food, and we would have courses whose service would take hours. The service would be 5 minutes. The eating would be 2 hours to 5 hours. A tradition was my mom and Aunt Diane would make a filter fish for the holidays, which our cats loved, but was not so great for my nostrils. My mom loved teaching, was a highly decorated special education teacher who taught learning disorders, emotional disorders, and behavioral disorders at school in every part of the city, from Worth on the south side, Nettlehurst in the Lakeview neighborhood, Orion, Uptown, and finally retiring at Douglas High School in the west side. She was recognized early in her career, was placed on a committee that wrote the special education curriculum at the time for the 80s and was considered for a leadership position in CPS, but they got eliminated in the strike in the late 70s. My mom valued friends, and she'd be thrilled to see all of you here. Her constant was her best friend, Edie, who had almost an 80. You said 7 decades, it's almost 8, with her. She also had friends who were like sisters, all of whom unfortunately passed before my mother, and was always with our family. There's Donna Manzera, Glenda Gordon, and Ricky Hurlin, who passed recently. My mom cultivated huge groups of friends, starting with the groups she made through TOPS, which would take off pounds sensibly, Sisterhood at our Shoal Niles Township Jewish congregation, teacher friends from Nettlehurst who had regular birthday gatherings until recently, and the group she made late in life through Hadassah, and we're greatly appreciative to everyone from that group. Family was of utmost importance to my mother. She loved her grandchildren, Eli, Miriam, and Jacob, and our beloved daughter of memory, Clara. During her final decade, she served as a nanny for my niece and nephew, and I rarely had a discussion with her where I didn't hear about Eli's musical performances or an activity of Miriam's. She loved her children and took great pride in our success. My mom was not the type of mom to attend David or my performances. I honestly tell you, can't remember her ever coming to a sporting event, ever coming to an awards banquet. But you could bet she took pride in them, and she told our friends about the honors received and how we're doing. I'd bump into people, and they'd always say, were you the lawyer or are you the accountant? But she knew, they all knew about it. My mom loved her cousins and loved visiting the cousins in California and loved the whole Krauss family. She was also a dedicated daughter and was always with great Aunt Betty and had her sister as a constant in her life. We took all our trips with Aunt Diana and Uncle Shelley. When my grandmother was stricken with mental illness, my mother, my aunt, and great aunt were constants in trying to make sure she got the best care, as David talked about. My mom loved travel. Due to limited means, our travel was mostly limited to where our station wagon would go. We took frequent trips to Florida. We went to Disney World right when it opened, and memorable trips to New England to check out colleges for my brother, Colorado to see Pikes Peak, and a spontaneous trip over Thanksgiving to Niagara Falls. She also traveled with my stepfather on his sales incentive trips to the Caribbean Islands, Hawaii, and Canada. Starting in the 90s, my mom was able to start to branch out and made her first trips to Italy and France. And after my grandfather passed away, my stepfather passed away, my mom started annual trips abroad, including cruise around South America, Israel, Russia, Balkans, the Mediterranean, the North Sea, northern Germany, and Alaska. Each trip would result in lots of purchases with new art and tchotchkes that anyone that comes to Shiva Home today will get to see to decorate her house. My mom loved her house. She didn't have one until the 70s, and she prized it and always wanted to keep it, and even wanted to die in it, as she ended up doing. What started as an iron store was soon renovated, with the garage turned into a living room, the basement finished, the porch turned into a bathroom and a larger living room, and the yard transformed into a showplace garden, which produced much of the produce my mom cooked and canned. She was an avid gardener, and people would stop by to comment on how beautiful her garden was. My mom took pride in her Jewish identity and made sure we always celebrate holidays and used to cook Jewish foods for her school, so students and our teachers knew Jewish traditions. Well, she was not a person who went to service as much and didn't know Hebrew like David and I do, and was not as much into the religious part of tradition. She was a staunch Zionist and made sure David and I had a strong sense of Jewish identity, and her house was filled with Jewish decorations. Finally, my mom was a proud woman. We always have to have something like on the offside, who didn't back down when she felt she was right, even made break in relations at times with people. However, she could also be forgiving, and even if she hadn't talked to you for years, she could patch up relations as if nothing ever happened. One of my traditions layers with my mom is she'd often call me upset about something my wife or I did, and then after berating me, telling me, "What time are we having lunch today?" Which became a weekly tradition, usually at Jersey Mike's, and they knew it because my mom would lecture me about something she watched on Rachel Maddow. And then she would always order enough food where she could take some home for leftovers. That is summation, my mom, Joanne Abelman. I will miss her dearly and love her always, and she'll make a mark on us always. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Jay and Jenny, Jacob and Eli, Edie, and Michael and David for beautiful words and for painting such a portrait of a woman who touched the lives of her family, her friends, her students in such powerful and important ways. There is not much that I can add that hasn't already been said in this. And I just, as I was listening, I just was reflecting on tonight when we begin the celebration of the festival of Sukkot. And Sukkot is also known as not just the festival of booths or a festival of Thanksgiving, it's known as Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. And I was thinking about what I'd learned about Joanne's life, her love of entertaining, her embrace of family and friends, and thinking that Sukkot is the perfect representation of that. With Sukkot, we're commanded to build these temporary structures, but not just to build them, but to fill them with guests, to invite people over, to celebrate with people. And I kind of imagine and would say that Joanne was constantly in that state of building a sukkah, right? Not necessarily physically putting it up, but putting it up in terms of welcoming guests in, of taking care of people, of showing her love and care for people in the overabundance of food, and making sure that nobody left hungry or empty with something to take home. And that she was able to take things that she loved and share them with others. And that's so very, very powerful and very, very important. And the other thing that I would say is that what came through in when I was talking with David and Michael and Jay yesterday afternoon, this great gift that she had for creating friendships, for creating connections. That's not something that everybody can do. And understanding that it takes work and it takes commitment, and that yes, there are going to be rifts, and yes, there are going to be times when people walk away, and sometimes they walk away and never come back, but not with Joanne. Joanne would constantly work, and sometimes it would take a little time. to do that, but those relationships would be restored and being brought back into the sukkah. And so as we are about to enter into our celebration of Sukkot, I think it's a perfect time to honor Joanne with all of the cherished memories, the times that you have where you were invited into her sukkah, into the warmth of her company and the care of the preparation of food and the welcome that people were made to feel. Family, friends, Judaism, home were at the core of her values and what her children, her grandchildren, continue to carry with them. And I'll close with one other thing that David had mentioned, and I think Michael had also echoed, that the successful relationships that they've entered into with their spouses, with Jay and with Jenny, are a tribute to what they learned from their mother about how you work and care about other people and how you continue to work on that relationship and to know that it is work and that it is worthwhile work to engage in. And so we honor the memory of Joanne Abelman, who was a loving mother to David and his Jay, Michael, and his Jenny, proud grandmother of Eli and Miriam, and Jacob, and Clara of blessed memory, a beloved sister of Diane and her Sheldon, and cherished niece of the late Betty and her Albert, also of blessed memory. May the memories we have continue to strengthen us, continue to bring us light and joy. It is in this way that her memory will continue to be a blessing to each and every one. And to this let us say, Amen. I invite you to rise for the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Utzehorim, כזוהר כי המסירים את נשמת יהודית בת בן ציון וגיטה בריינה שהלכה לעולמה בעל הרחמים יסיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר, Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Joanne Abelman, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And to this let us say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery located at 1700 West Rand Road in Arlington Heights. The family will be together at the Abelman residence at 8901 North Long Avenue in Skokie today following the interment, Tuesday night from 6 p.m. and Wednesday night from 6 p.m. Memorial contributions to the American Cancer Society would be appreciated. All that information is on the service folder, and for those of you joining us online, that information is on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing many of the cars with a flag that will be affixed to the top portion of your car. We'll have a car in the back of the funeral procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And for your own personal safety, I strongly recommend using a horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. And please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. The following people have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please stand next to her casket. Jacob Goroff, Neil Harriet, Miriam Goroff-Bell, Eli Goroff-Bell, Ron Packowitz, Don Gelfand, Jeremy Mink, and Sheldon Black. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Mrs. Joanne Abelman, along with Rabbi Paul Cohn and the entire Goroff-Abelman family from the chapel. Then you may return to your cars. Well, ladies and gentlemen, excuse me for this, we have one other person who would like to say something, so if we could just be seated for one other second.
Thank you. Good morning. I apologize for not getting up before you finished. My name is Dr. Deborah Crump. I am the former principal of Frederick Douglass Academy. Frederick Douglass was was a middle school and a high school. I met Joanne in the mid-90s at Arai. I was the assistant principal at Arai, and Joanne was especially a teacher. She was not only my employee, but she became a colleague and a friend. Joanne definitely was a teacher. When we developed a relationship, Joanne would pull me in and she gave me my lessons on Judaism. And she taught me about how things work in the community. She embraced me, and we all became friends with some of the other teachers, and we formed a birthday club. We met once a month, and we went and had lunch somewhere, and we exchanged gifts, and our friendship developed over the years. I've been to everybody's wedding, I've been to everybody's bar mitzvahs, and I went to her house, and she taught me what Passover was and is. And when you talk about cooking, when I went to Rye, I was a skinny person. You can see now that I've gained a few pounds, and that came from Joanne, because she brought goodies to school, and she would say, "Hey, I have something for you. Come to my room today now. Don't wait now." And she would bring sweets, and I'd say, I don't really do sugar well. She says, "You'll love it." And I did. When it was time for Passover, I knew she wasn't going to, she says, "I'm not going to be here for a few days because I have some cooking to do. And you come over, you and Pat, don't forget to bring the wine." And I had her laugh, and I was like, by the time I finish, I'm full and I'm drunk, because I have drank everything and I've eaten everything. But I loved it, and I looked forward to it every year. When I left Arai, I went to another high school on the south side, and then I was accepted as the principal of Douglass. Douglass started as a middle school. Joanne called me and says, "I'm coming over wherever you are, that's where I'm going." And I said, "I'm on the west side." I said, "It's not like Arai, because Arai is a melting pot. You on the west side." She says, "I can handle it." "Okay." She says, "And I know you'll do good, and I'm going to come and encourage you, and I'm going to support you." She did. We had 1,000 students, 1,100 students, and then we transitioned over the years from 6th grade to 9th grade, then to 10th grade, and then we lost the middle school, and then we went to high school. So then we became a high school. I said, "Are you going to stay here?" She says, "Where else am I going? I want to stay right here with you." And I said, "Wow." So of course, we had more dinners, we had more parties, and she brought everything about the Holocaust to her room. It was like going in the Holocaust Museum, because she had everything on the wall in the classroom around, and she taught all of us. When she finally retired, I can remember it just as if it was yesterday. I was so sick. Some kid at school, they all have germs. They give you something. I got a cold, and it turned into the flu. But I could not go to her retirement, because that just was out. And I was thinking about that today as I was driving. I was like, man, Buffalo Grove, that's a long ways. I live at the end of South Shore, literally at the end of the lake. That's where I live. So that's a drive. And I was like, and I can't be late, because Joanne would say, "And you're late?" So I'm here because I loved her, because she was my friend, because she taught me things. She shared her life with me. She told me about all her travels. She knew that I like to travel, so she says, listen, these are the places that you need to go. And I went to most of those places that you named because Joanne gave me some information about them and told me that's what I needed to do. So she shared her life, and she did not see color. And that is the beauty of her, because she taught me what it meant to have friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. At this time, we invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Joanne Abelman from the chapel. Then you may return to your cars.
I have to do the bathroom too, so before I leave the